Hello everybody and welcome back again. In this video I'm gonna continue my series of tennis legends and heroes, and today's episode is dedicated to Pete Sampras, aka Pistol Pete, aka King of Swing. When Pete Sampras turned pro in 1988, we already had Andre Agassi on the scene, and Pete Sampras together with Andre Agassi, Jim Courier, Michael Chang, Todd Martin, and David Wheaton was part of the new young power generation of American tennis players that hit the scene, and they developed the game and took over the era after John McEnroe and Jimmy Connors. These guys were super trained athletes with hard ground strokes and huge serves. So it was a little bit contrast to the game we saw in 80s, but this new power generation of American tennis player came to dominate the scene for the next 12, 15 years, in my opinion. And Pete Sampras, who won 14 Grand Slams in his career, 7 at Wimbledon, 5 at US Open, and 2 at the Australian Open, only lost 4 of his finals in Grand Slams, and those were in 1992's US Open campaign against Stefan Edberg, and in the Australian Open final again is his nemesis Andre Agassi, and the US Open in 1999, I think, and no, it was the US Open in 2000 and against Marat Safin, and the 2001 final against Leighton Hewitt at the US Open. So through his career, Pete Sampras won astonishing 64 titles. 11 of those were at Masters. And back then it was more clay court tournaments, and we all know that wasn't his best surfaces. And he also won the World Tour finals at 5 occasions. He won Davis Cup twice. He won International Tennis Federation's biggest event, Grand Slam Cup, that held a huge amount of money to the winner. I think in the beginning it was $2 million to the guy who won that tournament. And Pete Sampras won that tournament twice, in 1990 and 97. And Pete Sampras had a couple of huge records that are still standing. He has the highest rate of winning percentage in Wimbledon. He has 63-7 there, and at the US Open who has 71-9 wins, and that gives him around a percentage of around 90%. And he has won the year-end ranking for 6 consecutive years, which is also a record. And he was the number 1 player ranked for 286 weeks. So 286 weeks was the record until Roger Federer surpassed him. And he has the highest percentage of winning Grand Slams if you count those players that have won over 10 Grand Slams. And Pete Sampras is, together with Ken Rosewell and Rafael Nadal, the only players that have won Grand Slams in their teenage years, in the 20s and in the 30s. So totally in his career, he also beat top 10 players 124 times and beat 23 Grand Slam winners through his career. So that's a huge numbers also for Pete Sampras. And to begin with, what is he known for? Pete Sampras is known for his superb serve, his lethal serve, his volley skills, his overhead smash, his running forehand, and his athleticism on court. And many people forget that because Pete Sampras' serve was so huge back then when he played, it almost took the focus out of his all-round game that he possessed, because Pete Sampras had in the beginning of his career, he started out as an all-court player. And when he was 13 years old, he switched from double-handed backhand to single-handed backhand by the recommendation of his coach. So from that on, he went on to play with single-handed backhand, who was very underrated in my opinion, because he could challenge from the baseline. He could hit winners from the baseline from both his flat forehand and his backhand. And like I told you, he started out as an all-court player. He had his huge serve, which is developed even more and better in the later stages of his career. But in the beginning of his career, he was a baseliner with his huge serve. He challenged, he beat many of his opponents from the baseline. He has a very underrated baseline game. And when he met John McEnroe for the first time, John McEnroe said afterwards that about Pete Sampras' forehand, that when he faced his forehand, it was so hard and fast that when you try to return, it felt like you were hitting a basketball. It was so heavy and fast, and his cross-court forehand, his running forehand was one of his big trademarks, and he had the best overhead smash, in my opinion, in the history of tennis. So Pete Sampras, people who say he was just a volley and server are wrong. And his main thing was to build up his game by putting his opponents in defensive position to later execute the points from the net or by a winner, because he could challenge, he could battle, he could hit winners mostly from his forehand, but his backhand was superb also. And later in his career, when he started to get back injuries, I think it was in the end of 97 or 98, he started to slice more. And after that, he started to even serve better through his career, to the end of his career. He started to serve more powerful and played more economic to execute and don't go into long rallies. Just look at his US Open campaign in 2002 when he won his last Grand Slam. He served 144 aces in that tournament. And in the Wimbledon campaign of year 2000, he served around 120 aces in that tournament. So that was amazing numbers for him, because when he knew that he didn't want to battle too much from the baseline when he has the advantage of this huge serve that gave him 3 points. All right. His career, like I told you, started in '88. He won his first Grand Slam, maiden Grand Slam at US Open as a 19 years old guy. And he beat Andre Agassi in that final. And on his way to the final, he beat two former US Open champions in John McEnroe, who he beat in the semifinals. And earlier, I think it was in the fourth round, he beat Ivan Lendl. And he closed the circle in his career by beating Andre Agassi again in that memorable final in 2002. So he topped his career by winning his last tournament, his last match in a Grand Slam final. How many people can top that? It's amazing to end a fairy tale career in that kind of fashion. So through his career, when he played, he was, like I told you, an all-quarter, but later on, from 19 to 92, he was a solid top 10 player. But after the loss in US Open against Stefan Edberg in 1992, he was pretty pissed off because he lost the semifinal also at Wimbledon that year to Goran Ivanisevic, who he later came on to beat in 2 Wimbledon finals. And he told to himself that I'm pissed off now. I'm not going to take this anymore. I want to be the best tennis player in the world. And we saw the transformation in the next year in 1993, where he won his first Wimbledon title and beat Jim Courier, who at that time was the world number one. He had reached all the Grand Slam finals and won 4 Grand Slams to his name. So he was the man to beat then, but Sampras won Wimbledon final in 4 sets, and later on he won that tournament 6 times more, totally 7 in a winning streak until the year 2000. He only lost once. I'm gonna go into that later. So Pete Sampras, who also won at the US Open 5 times, he won that in 1990, 93, 95, 96, and in the year 2000, and won the Australian Open in 1994 and 97. So Pete, when he competed, he was this focused guy who many thought what was very boring because he didn't say much, he didn't talk too much. He just let his racket do all the talking for him. And one of the other players, like his all-time nemesis Andre Agassi, faded away for a couple of months. When he disappeared, we all know they had Andre Agassi had high peaks and low dips, and Pete Sampras didn't have that. When other players didn't perform, mainly because of him, he collected those Grand Slam titles. He was consistent there, and I'm gonna go into why he wasn't as consistent in clay courts. Because in his career, he totally won 3 clay court tournaments, and that was one Master in Italian Open in Rome where he beat Boris Becker. He won a clay court tournament in Kitzbühel, and the third was in Atlanta. And he reached the semifinal of French Open in 1996, where he lost to Yevgeny Kafelnikov, who later on went on to win the tournament by beating Michael Stich in the final. And after his career, some people asked him, should he have you change something in the game? He said, maybe if I changed the frame of my racket to a little bit bigger racket, I could maybe have won the French Open. But he was afraid that a bigger racket will affect his hot spot on his serve, because back then his serve and volley skills and all-round game, it didn't bite clay that much like it did on the fast surfaces. But his career ended up pretty well, in my opinion. Anyway, he won 14 Grand Slam, and that was a record until the big three surpassed him, with Roger Federer first, and then Nadal, and of course last year when Djokovic surpassed him also. Or maybe was it this year? No, it was last year, my friends. All right. So his playing style, like I told you, he was a baseliner with the huge serve in the beginning, but later on, when he developed his serve, he did this transformation in his game where he took advantage of this huge serve, which is one of the best in my opinion. Sampras, to me, has the best first and second serve in the history. He's the only guy that I think that has 2 first serve, because his serve was powerful with spin, and he could just hit every corner of the service game when he wanted. And Pete Sampras, I've never seen a guy that served his way out of trouble that Pete Sampras did. Because sometimes when I saw him play, it felt like he had these aces in his pocket. He just took up the ball and swing the racket, boom. Special under pressure moments. So Pete Sampras was the best dime server. If you took a dime and put it on the service corner, wherever you want in the service corner, he would hit that dime without a doubt. So Pete Sampras' huge main serve was a key factor to his success. And if my life was on stake, and if I had to choose a player that's gonna serve for my life, I will choose Pete Sampras to take that serve. That's how good he was when he served, with precision, with spin, with angles, and he disguised the serve so good that when he hit the serve, it was pretty much over. But like I told you, when later stage of his career, when he got his back injuries, he started to develop his serve better, because the back injury affected his baseline game, and he had to, like a sportsman, like a thinker he had to find ways to continue delivering at the high level that he has done through his career. So that was a wise decision. And if you haven't seen Pete Sampras play, I'm not counting YouTube highlights, I'm not counting small short clips that you see on internet. You really had to be there to feel his dominance. Between the years 1993 to 1998, which I say was his prime years, his peak years, he was just outstanding. He was just marvelous. He was just so hard to beat. And ask his fellow peers, who later on, his Hall of Fame contenders that he faced, his Hall of Fame players that he had faced on tour, guys like Courier, Agassi, Chang, Kafelnikov, McEnroe, etc., Boris Becker, you can just go ask them what they will have to say against about Pete Sampras and how good he showed when he was in the zone on court. Again, Kafelnikov quoted the famous words after his defeat in 1997 in the World Tour Finals, where he said, "When Pete Sampras plays like this, all of us just have to focus on the second prize." That's how good he was. He was so scary. He was clinical when he was in the zone, because Sampras didn't disappear on fast courts. So Pete Sampras, like I told you, his serve. I'm gonna talk about his serve now. This huge weapon, this huge nuclear weapon that could serve or set up points for him, is the smoothest, most beautiful tennis stroke I've seen in my life. It was like eye candy to watch him perform from the service line, because even though Andre Agassi is my all-time favorite and Pete Sampras was his biggest nemesis, I'm not gonna say I liked when Pete Sampras performed like that, because I was an Andre Agassi fan. But when he played so beautiful, you couldn't just ignore that. I just took my hat off for Pete Sampras for perform quality tennis like he did in those days. And his rivalry to get against Andre Agassi is one of the best rivalries of the tennis history, due to the different playing style that they faced. It was the same again with Björn Borg and John McEnroe, and later on Roger Federer and Rafael Nadal. Agassi, in my opinion, who is the meanest, cleanest ball striker, the ball basher of all time, had huge problem to return Pete Sampras' big serve, because we all know Agassi is considered as the greatest returner in the world, together with Novak Djokovic, and he had troubles of taking his teeth into this great serve. At that time, there were many great servers. There were many guys that hit harder on the serve, but Sampras also had in the game. His serve was more accurate. Sampras knew how to take the big advantage of his serve. And his serve, like I told you, I'm going to go into that also. His rivalry against Andre Agassi, when they ended their careers, he was 20-14 in head-to-head against Andre Agassi, and 9-7 in finals and 4-1 in Grand Slam finals. The only loss was in Australian Open final in 1995, where Agassi beat him. I think it was a tight fifth set. The wear went out in Sampras' game in the last fifth set, I think. But anyway, Pete Sampras was so dominant at that time that it was hard to describe if you haven't seen him. So I'm gonna go into his serve. His serve was clinical, surgical, with precision that it was unknown before, because the power and elegance from his serve comes from the body rotation, the high ball toss, the high elbow snapping down, and the power in his legs, together with huge amounts of timing and coordination. You know, timing is everything in sports where you have small margins. And 100 of a second is so important. And Pete's, if you have followed his service motion, it was amazing. So when he had his serve on play, if the opponent managed to return his serve, he was there just to end the point. And his baseline game, he could challenge and battle without a doubt. He had many matches where he has outplayed his opponents from the baseline. And I can remember two matches. It was Miami Open in 1994, a final where he beat Andre Agassi from the baseline. He barely approached the net in that match. And in the quarters of US Open in 1993, where he beat Michael Chang in a four-set tight battle, he lost the first set 7-0 in the tiebreak and went on to win the second set in tiebreak. And in the beginning of the first set, Michael Chang took the first game, and then Sampras won 11 straight games before Michael Chang finally took a game in the fourth set. And Sampras showed in that match how of a terrific baseliner he is, because he has this backhand, one-handed backhand, who reminds me a little bit of Roger Federer's. He could find the angles and the lines, and his powerful flat forehand created winners and put his opponent out of rhythm. And it caused a lot of damages if you have seen his matches. So his serve was not the only thing in his game that made him superb. It was everything combined, together with his determined, his focus, his athleticism, his acrobatic style when he approached the net, and his game in generally that was barely under the radar. He barely dipped. And I can easily say, my friends, the level that Pete Sampras showed from 1993 to 1998 on the fast courts of grass, hard court, indoor carpets are the highest level of tennis I've seen in my life. I'm not gonna swipe away his clay court performances. I'm not counting that in. He was decent, but in that time you had this clay court specialist. It was tough to beat them. He couldn't touch them, because back then going from hard court to clay court was like day and night or day. It was a total difference because of the court speeds that was back then. The ball was not heavy as it was today. And we all know after year 2000, 2002, around that year, the ATP tour, the ATP supervisors started to slow down many of the courts. The only courts that have the similar speed is the French Open. And back then, you have the specialists on clay. You had clay court specialists like Jim Courier, Sergio Bruguera, Thomas Musser, Kafelnikov, just to name a bunch of them, and a couple of Swedish guys, a couple of French dudes that were good on clay. They were the specialists. After the clay court season, you didn't see these dirt rats until the next season almost. You had a couple of all-round players like Bruguera, Musser, and Courier who competed on all surfaces. But it's not like today. It's easy to be consistent nowadays, even if you count out the big three, because you can take your game style, which is mainly these serve and volleys. They are not on the circus anymore. You have one or two significant players, and the only player that I can come up is Misha Zverev, who is the only serve and volley I've seen lately on the circus. Maybe I missed someone else, but anyway, you could take your baseline game to Australia. You can take your baseline game to Australian Open, French Open, Wimbledon, and US Open, and you can. It won't affect. You don't have to change much in your game. You can just take and compete and go deep in those tournaments with this game. It was not like that before. That's why I said it was harder to compete back then. And Pete Sampras beat 23 Grand Slam winners through his career. Just to name a few of them. He beat Jimmy Connors, who was not at his peak. He only met him once or twice. John Macker, who made a good deep run at both Wimbledon in 1990 and 1989. The last 2 good years of his career. He met him then. He put up a performance against Sampras. He met Andre Agassi. He met Jim Courier. Michael Chang, who all of those was Grand Slam winners. He met Grand Slam winners like Kafelnikov, Bruguera, Muster, Stich, Becker, Patrick Rafter, Leighton Hewitt, Marat Safin, Albert Costa, who was a clay court specialist, Gustavo Kuerten, Peter Korda, Just a few of those, to name a few of them. Ivan Lendl, of course, Stefan Edberg, Mats Wilander, Yannick Noah. These are guys that has a grand slam to the name. That competition Pete Sampras had to face. None of them were consistent all the time. I'm not comparing these guys to the big three because they are consistent, the most consistent guys you have seen. But Pete Sampras, when he played and performed against those players, it was amazing how he beat them, because Michael Stich also beat Richard Krajicek, who also beat him, who won the Grand Slam in 1996 at Wimbledon. Michael Stich, Richard Krajicek, Sergio Bruguera are the only one of these guys that has a plus in head-to-head stats against Pete Sampras. But in the French Open campaign in 1996, Pete Sampras actually beat Sergio Bruguera and Jim Courier, who was two former French Open champions. So that's not bad, my friends, even though he was much better on the faster courts. And I can say, like I told you, the level that he performed on grass, on hard courts, and indoor are the best I've seen in my life, my friend. Because Wimbledon was his living room from 1993 to year 2000. He only dropped those keys one time in Wimbledon in 1996, where he lost to the Dutch Richard Krajicek in the quarters. Otherwise, there was no doubt about who was the best player. He was the king of grass. He won 7 titles there. And the peak Sampras, the prime Sampras' level was much higher, in my opinion, than the peak Federer, the peak Nadal on clay. Novak Djokovic monstrous season in 2011 and 2015. I'm not counting titles, the most Grand Slam in those performances. I just count the highest level of tennis that I've witnessed. Because when Sampras played, it was no doubt who was the better player. When you see other players today perform, even though, example, when Nadal meets Djokovic, you don't know the outcome of the match. It takes a couple of games, a couple of sets maybe, to see who is the better at. But when Sampras played, oh my God, it was not like that. You just saw from the beginning, this guy is the winner. That's how good he was, my friend. That's why I've told many friends, and some of them agree with me, many of them actually. I have maybe one or two that doesn't agree with me, that the highest level of tennis I've seen on a tennis court, like I told you, you have to witness his dominance. You had to be there to see him when he faced those opponents and basically destroy them time to time. I'm gonna talk about some of the most memorable matches that I witnessed Pete Sampras perform. The first one is the indoor final, the ATP World Tour Finals in 1996, where he beat Boris Becker in a 5-set battle, which in my opinion is the best indoor match of all time. And the second one, who is stuck to my memories, is the Wimbledon final in 1995, where he beat Boris Becker. He trashed Boris Becker in that match. Boris Becker didn't have a clue or answer to get through. And in the final of Wimbledon 1999 against Andre Agassi played good in that match. He tried everything, believe me, he played his A game. But Pete Sampras blew him off court, not only with serve and volley, from the baseline also. Pete Sampras outplayed him in that match in every section. And then we have the AO semifinal in 1995 against Jim Courier. That match, Jim Courier quickly went up in 2-0 lead. And then when they were on a break, Pete Sampras cried. He was very devastating. His coach then, Gullickson, rest in peace, was ill. He knew he was gonna die. He was pretty sad. He transformed that pain to a hell of a performance, a high quality game. And after that, he won that match, which was one of the greatest comebacks, in my opinion. to win that match, but later on lost the final against Andre Agassi. And then we have the best four-set match I've seen in my life, and that was the the US Open quarterfinal of 2001, where he beat his all-time nemesis Andre Agassi in a four-set tiebreaker. Agassi grabbed the first tiebreak, and then later he won the previous three sets in tiebreaks, and that's a superb match in my opinion. Eye candy match with great baseline, with great serve and volley skills. It was an all-round game. If you wanted to learn from the textbook, just watch that match. And then we have another quarterfinal in US Open. It was 1996 against Alex Corretja, a five-set battle where Corretja actually was one break up in the fifth set. In the beginning of the fourth set, I believe, if I can remember correct, Pete Sampras vomited, and many thought that he's not gonna make it. He's gonna pull off, maybe play the match, but not win. He won that match. He turned the tables around. He showed when it was really mattered his A game, and he won that match, and later on won the tournament. That a couple of matches that I remember, and the indoor finals of ATP Masters in 1987, where he beat Yevgeny Kafelnikov and thrashed him in that match also. That's one of the most memorable matches. And of course, a Wimbledon final, I think it was in 1998, where he beat Goran Ivanisevic. It was a five-set battle, I think. That was a huge match. If you want to learn something about serve, that match is the match to watch, because they serve nuclear bombs, both of them. And Pete Sampras, his game is still attached to my memory. The quality, everything that he put up on court was quality. So my friends, I want to thank you for watching this video. Take care and goodbye. Bye.